Peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. One day in August 2018, in the city of 15th of May in Cairo Governorate, a man was walking down the street on his way home, just as he did every day. This man worked as a baker, and he returned home from work at exactly the same time every day. He was never early or late. His life was quiet, routine, and predictable. But this time, something very different was waiting for him. As soon as he started climbing the stairs, he smelled a very strong odor of gas. The closer he got to the door of his apartment, the stronger the smell became. The moment he opened the door, the smell was overwhelming, making it difficult for him to breathe and causing pain in his chest. He quickly ran to the windows and opened them one by one, while calling out to his wife in a voice filled with fear. He went into the kitchen first to find the source of the gas and turn it off. There, he found that the gas valve had been turned all the way on. Even more strangely, there was nothing on the stove to suggest that she had been cooking or had simply forgotten to turn it off. It was obvious that someone had opened the gas deliberately. His heart began pounding rapidly. He kept calling his wife again and again, but there was no response. He went toward the bedroom looking for her, and there he found his wife lying on the floor, her body covered in blood. Her eyes were open, but she was completely motionless. The man could not process what he was seeing. He stood there for a few seconds, but those seconds felt like an entire lifetime. Then he suddenly began screaming at the top of his voice. He ran to the balcony and continued shouting and calling for help, hoping someone would hear him and come to his aid. After a while, people began gathering beneath the building. One of the neighbors realized that something terrible had happened and immediately called the police without waiting. The man went back inside the apartment and sat beside his wife's body, holding her hand and unable to believe that she was dead. Somewhere inside him, he still hoped that she might be alive, and that if an ambulance arrived quickly enough, she could still be saved. When the police arrived, they found the man sitting on the floor beside the body, unable to move because of the shock. They had to spend quite some time trying to convince him to step away from the scene so they could examine the crime scene and begin their investigation. And this was the first scene of a murder that would shock the entire 15th of May area. At first, everything was a mystery, and every detail raised another question. Who could have done this to such a kind woman? And what could possibly have driven someone to commit such a crime? But after days of investigation, the truth slowly began to emerge. And when the real identity of the suspect was finally revealed, neither the neighbors nor even the family members could believe what they were hearing, because that particular name was the last name anyone could have expected. Let's go back in time for a moment and take a look at this man's life. His name was Ahmed, and he had worked as a government employee, but he had taken early retirement about 3 years before the murder. Even after retiring, however, he didn't want to sit at home without a job, so he decided to look for another source of income outside his former position. Eventually, he found work at a bakery very close to his home. Ahmed was known by everyone around him as a self-made man. He had built his life through his own efforts and had started from nothing. He was originally from Beni Suef Governorate, and his father had been married several times. With each marriage, he became increasingly distant from the children from his previous marriage. Because of this, Ahmed grew up learning from an early age to rely on himself and not expect support or assistance from his father. Ahmed was married to a woman named Anwar, and they had been living together for more than 15 years. Their relationship was peaceful and stable, and all the neighbors liked them. They always saw them as an example of a quiet home without problems. Anwar was a simple and kind woman. She was known among the neighbors for always being willing to help anyone in need, even during times when her own circumstances were not easy. The family's income was modest, but Ahmed and Anwar lived with a great sense of contentment and peace of mind. They were satisfied with whatever they had, no matter how little it was. And that was one of the things the neighbors admired most about their life together. Their daily routine was extremely consistent. Ahmed would leave for work at dawn and return at around 2 p.m., and that schedule almost never changed. The day of the murder was an ordinary Friday, just like any other day. Ahmed said goodbye to his wife before leaving for work, as he did every day. He had no idea that this would be the last time he would ever see Anwar alive. When the security officers and forensic crime scene team arrived at the scene, they began examining the apartment and searching for any evidence that could help them solve the case. The first thing that caught their attention was that the apartment door showed no signs of forced entry or violence, not even a minor scratch. This meant that whoever entered the apartment had done so normally, without breaking the door or forcing anyone to open it. And from there, the first strong possibility began to emerge. The person who entered was someone Anwar knew, not a stranger, someone she trusted enough to let inside without fear or suspicion. In the living room, the investigators found a tray with 2 cups of tea. What was strange was that both cups were exactly as they had been served. Not even a single sip had been taken from either one. This raised the possibility that Anwar had received someone at her home, welcomed them, and prepared tea for them herself. In other words, this was someone she knew well enough that she felt no fear or concern around them. But before they could drink the tea, the crime took place. Even more strangely, the fingerprints found on both cups belonged only to Anwar, as if the other person had been careful from the very beginning not to leave any trace behind. When the forensic team examined the body, they discovered that Anwar had suffered a very large number of stab wounds to different parts of her body, including her neck, abdomen, and chest. The sheer number of stab wounds indicated extreme violence and a clear determination to end her life. It also appeared that the entire crime had taken place inside the bedroom, with no evidence suggesting that it had started or continued anywhere else inside the apartment. The security officers also noticed that the wardrobe in the bedroom was open and somewhat disorganized. When they asked Ahmed whether there was anything important inside the wardrobe, he confirmed that there had been some money, along with a few pieces of gold belonging to Anwar, but both were completely gone. At that moment, the investigators began to realize that the crime had a clear motive: robbery. Everything pointed to the perpetrator being someone Anwar knew. The door had been opened without any signs of forced entry, and the 2 cups of tea suggested that she had welcomed this person into her home normally. Then, the money and gold were stolen from a specific place inside the wardrobe, while the rest of the apartment had not been searched. This meant that whoever entered the apartment knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly where to find it. That led the investigators to believe that the person had been inside the apartment before, knew the place well, and was not a stranger to it. But during a detailed examination of the crime scene, the forensic team discovered a very important piece of evidence: a bloody footprint from a woman's shoe found next to the body. According to the investigators' estimates, the murder had taken place early that morning, sometime between 8 and 9 a.m., while Ahmed was at work at the bakery. This made the investigators consider another very important point. The person who committed the crime knew Ahmed's schedule well. They knew that he would be at work at that time and that the chances of him unexpectedly returning home were very low. The security officers began questioning the neighbors one by one, and almost all of them gave the same answer. Ahmed and Anwar had a very good relationship, There were no known problems between them, and no one was known to have any serious dispute with the couple. But one of the neighbors told the officer about something important. He said there had been an old dispute between Anwar and a female neighbor who lived on the floor above them. The disagreements had been over minor issues, but they had happened more than once. The security officers immediately went to question this neighbor. They confirmed that there had indeed been arguments and verbal disputes between her and Anwar, but the conflicts were not serious enough to suggest that they could have escalated into murder. The neighbor herself was extremely shocked by the accusation. She said that she had never wished Anwar any harm. This led the investigators to broaden their search once again. At the same time, another team was reviewing surveillance cameras on the streets surrounding the building. However, there was a problem. None of the cameras directly captured the entrance to the building, making it difficult for investigators to determine who had entered or left around the time of the murder. But suddenly, a new lead emerged. A young man named Kareem, who owned a mobile phone repair shop at the beginning of the street, had installed a surveillance camera above his shop. The camera covered a large portion of the street. The security officers carefully reviewed the footage, and there they saw something extremely important. A woman wearing a blue khimar entered the building at exactly 7 a.m. and left around 8 a.m. But as she was coming down the stairs, she appeared extremely nervous. She was walking unusually fast, and there were dark stains visible on her khimar, which could have been blood. They summoned Ahmed and asked him to watch the footage. The moment he saw the woman, his expression completely changed and he was visibly shocked. Then he said something no one expected to hear. "That's my sister. It can't possibly be her." The woman in the video was named Samah. She was Ahmed's paternal sister, meaning they shared the same father but had different mothers. After the security officers summoned Samah and began questioning her, they confirmed that she had indeed stayed at her brother Ahmed's home the night before the murder. According to her statement, she had left the house early that morning and traveled to Beni Suef to visit her daughter because of an emergency. She also claimed that she had called her brother at 7 a.m. to reassure him that she had arrived safely in the town. But when the security officers began verifying her story, a major contradiction emerged. The investigation in Beni Suef revealed that Samah had actually arrived at the transportation station at 11:30 a.m., not at 7 a.m. as she had told her brother and the security officers. That huge discrepancy in the timeline opened the door to serious suspicion. When the security officers confronted her with the contradiction and asked how she could have called from Beni Suef at 7 a.m. when she had not actually arrived there until 11:30, Samah completely broke down. Through her tears, she confessed to the truth that no one had expected. She was the one who had killed Anwar. Let's go back in time once again, but this time, let's take a closer look at Samah's life. Samah was a woman in her mid-40s. She had gotten married when she was still very young, but her husband had been absent from her life for years. After having her only daughter, she found herself carrying all the responsibility on her own, both financially and emotionally. In front of other people, Samah liked to present herself as a kind and religious woman who was struggling in life and always willing to help anyone in need. But the people who were actually close to her, such as her siblings and relatives, saw a completely different side of her personality. Most of her family had practically cut ties with her because of the way she treated them. She would put her own interests above everything else, even if that meant hurting someone else or making them pay the price for her decisions. As for her relationship with her brother Ahmed, it had been almost non-existent for many years. But about 2.5 years before the crime, Samah decided to reconnect with him. She claimed that her reason was, We have to maintain our family ties. But the truth was that she had learned from other people that Ahmed was financially comfortable and that he lived with his wife alone in a comfortable apartment without any children. From that point on, Samah began visiting her brother's home regularly. She became very close to Anwar and would occasionally spend the night at their apartment. Her visits usually had a reason. Either she needed financial assistance or she had come to Cairo looking for work. Almost every time she would tell Ahmed that she needed his help and that she was going through difficult circumstances. During one of her first visits, Ahmed noticed how difficult his sister's situation was. So, without her even asking, he decided to give her some money as a gift for her daughter, especially since the daughter was about to get married at the time. From that point on, Samah began to feel that she had found an opportunity she could take advantage of. Quietly, without anyone noticing, she started paying close attention to the household. She learned Ahmed's schedule in detail, noticed where he and Anwar kept their valuables, and began thinking about stealing the gold that belonged to Anwar without anyone suspecting her. On Thursday, one day before the crime, Ahmed returned home carrying 45,000 Egyptian pounds. This was his end-of-service retirement benefit. He hadn't had time to deposit the money in the bank because of his work schedule, so he agreed with Anwar to keep it temporarily inside the wardrobe until Sunday, when he would take it to the bank himself. When Samah heard this while they were having dinner together, she felt that the opportunity had suddenly become much bigger. It was no longer just about the gold. Now there was also a large amount of cash. That same night, she told her brother and his wife that her daughter had called her and asked her to return to Beni Suef quickly because of an emergency. She told them that she would travel early Friday morning instead of Saturday, as they had originally planned. Samah woke up with her brother before the dawn prayer and had breakfast with him. Afterward, she said goodbye to him and watched him leave for work, just as he did every day. But instead of going to the transportation station, as she had claimed, she found a tuk-tuk waiting outside the building. She got inside and stayed out of sight, waiting for about half an hour to make sure that Ahmed would not return home for any reason. Samah had hidden a knife beneath her khimar. She had stolen it earlier from her brother's kitchen and tucked it into her lap without anyone noticing. At exactly 7 a.m., she went back up to the apartment and knocked on the door. Anwar opened it looking very surprised because Samah was supposed to have already been on her way to the transportation station by then. Samah made an excuse, telling her that she hadn't found suitable transportation and had suddenly started feeling unwell. So, she said, she decided to come back and sit at the apartment for a while until she felt better, and then she would try to travel again. She asked Anwar for a cup of hot tea. Anwar went into the kitchen without any suspicion and prepared the tea for her herself. Then, she went into the bedroom to get her phone and call her daughter. At that moment, Samah followed her into the bedroom while holding the knife and attacked her with multiple consecutive stabs to different parts of her body until Anwar collapsed to the floor and died, without having any real opportunity to defend herself or even call for help. Afterward, with remarkable calmness, Samah opened the wardrobe and took the money and gold. She then went into the kitchen and turned the gas valve all the way on, hoping that the gas would cause a fire that would destroy any evidence that could lead investigators to her. Once she made sure she had not left behind any obvious trace, she quickly left the building and traveled to Beni Suef, just as she had originally planned. There, she went to her daughter and the rest of her family and behaved completely normally, as if nothing had happened, as if she wasn't the same woman who had committed that crime only a few hours earlier. Then, Ahmed returned home from work in the afternoon, opened the door to his apartment, and saw a scene that would remain etched in his memory for the rest of his life. What was even more disturbing was that, throughout the hours after the crime, Samah had behaved completely normally in front of her daughter and family in Beni Suef. She laughed, ate, and talked about ordinary things without showing any obvious signs of anxiety or remorse. This was one of the things that shocked even the security officers when they first encountered her, before they knew the truth. When the residents of the May 15th area learned that the killer was Ahmed's own sister, they initially couldn't believe the news. They had often seen her visiting her brother and spending long hours with Anwar. They described her as a good and decent woman, just like her brother. And that was what made the shock far greater than that of an ordinary murder. Samah's confession in front of the security officers was a devastating shock for her brother Ahmed. He simply couldn't comprehend that the sister he had welcomed into his home and his life, and helped every time she needed him, was the very person who had killed his wife in such a brutal way for money and gold. After the investigation was completed and all the evidence had been collected, including the forensic evidence from the crime scene, the neighbor's testimony, Kareem's surveillance footage that revealed everything, and the contradiction in Samah's arrival time in Beni Suef that exposed her lie. The entire case was first referred to the public prosecution and then to the criminal court. The case took a long time to proceed through the courts. When it reached the sentencing stage, the court referred the case files to the Grand Mufti of Egypt in July 2024, which is a standard legal procedure in cases where the death penalty may be imposed. After the Mufti's opinion was returned to the court, the announcement of the verdict was postponed several times, the last of which was in September 2024. Eventually, the day came when the court issued its final ruling. Samah was sentenced to death by hanging. A final verdict brought an end to one of the most mysterious and shocking cases in the 15 May area. It closed the file on a crime that revealed how a person could spend years pretending to be kind in front of everyone, while in reality being willing to kill someone close to her one day if money and gold were within her reach. After the verdict, Ahmed never returned to his old life. The apartment where he had lived with Anwar for 15 years became filled with painful memories, and the bakery he had loved became a place that reminded him every day of the time he used to return home, the day that changed his life forever. As for the name Samah, among the residents of the area, it became synonymous with one of the worst forms of betrayal of one's own blood. Her story continued to be told for years afterward as an example of how a kind smile and a good appearance can sometimes hide the most dangerous intentions imaginable. This story is not simply an ordinary murder case. It is a story about how a person can hide their true intentions for years behind the mask of family ties, kindness, and smiles, and how difficult financial circumstances can become, for some people, an easy justification for destroying the lives of others without remorse. Anwar was a kind woman, loved by everyone around her. She had never harmed anyone, and she placed her trust in one of the closest people within her husband's family. Sadly, that trust became the very reason for her tragic end. And if anyone believes that difficult circumstances can justify doing anything, this story provides a clear answer. Millions of people live through circumstances far more difficult and never even consider hurting someone close to them. The difference isn't in the circumstances. The difference is in the person themselves and the choices they make. And with that, today's episode comes to an end. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you receive all the new episodes. See you in a new episode. Goodbye.